You VT English 4 students, hope you're having a great week. This week we're going to be talking about syntax. We often talk about diction and syntax in the same sentence. Diction is word choice. Syntax is how you put words together to make sentences and paragraphs to make meaning. So let's get started. So first of all, we're going to be looking at what syntax is, and then we're going to be looking at how to analyze it. And this link is where I got this information. So what is syntax? Again, syntax is sentence structure, how you put words together with punctuation, how you put things together, kind of like an artist uses brush strokes to make a painting. You can have long flowing sentences, or you can have short choppy sentences. You use them together and you can have a rhythmic feel to your writing. So how do authors use it? Well, authors use syntax to create meaning, to push forth that meaning. They also use it to emphasize certain messages or themes. And they also use syntax to create emotions in their readers. Well, you might ask, well, how do they do that? Well, you can use different sentence structures to create different emotions. Repetition, words or phrases, can often build a feeling of anger, lust, or passion, or frustration. Abrupt changes in syntax can also show confusion or betrayal. Good authors also use syntax to emphasize certain things that they want to communicate. Authors can manipulate what readers pay attention to. For example, in this picture, you are obviously going to be looking at the bright red umbrella. Important themes or ideas will receive special emphasis. Often this includes repetition of words or phrases. Sentence length is another way authors use syntax. So if you have a long, compound, or complex sentence mixed with short, impactful ones, it gives your writing a certain rhythm. Short sentences strung together slows readers down, drawing special attention. Right? So you have to stop as a reader when there's punctuation, so it stops the flow. However, long flowing sentences help readers move more quickly through the passage. Now, not everyone agrees on this. Sometimes people think that long flowing sentences will draw things, make things longer, and short sentences make it faster. But I disagree. I think this is more accurate. So when we're analyzing sentence length, we need to ask what effect these structures have on meaning, on emotions, or emphasis on texts we analyze. So here's an example. The first three sentences of The River Nemanus take up only a single line of text, each one a mere 4 words. My name is Allison. I'm 15 years old. My parents are dead. These 4 brief sentences set the entire stage for readers to see Allison's shock-induced emotional disconnect. This is how the story begins, and so we get a kind of an insight on how she is feeling, how she's dealing with the loss of her parents, and hopefully we'll see some growth as we read on. Punctuation is another tool that authors use to manipulate or have good syntax. Authors use punctuation or neglect using punctuation in sentences to create an effect. They do it on purpose. So as you analyze, look for what's different and try to figure out what the function is. Is it to clarify? Is it to interrupt the reading? or show a change in attitude or tone. Each is a deliberate choice by the artist to convey an important message we need to pay attention to. We'll see an example of this in passage 2. Authors often use repeated first and last words of sentences to emphasize things that are important. They do that especially to draw attention to something they want readers to focus in on. A lot of times, if you can see groups of 3, it's something to really pay attention to. We'll also see an example of this shortly. So as you analyze it, decide why they are repeated and what point or message the author is trying to make. Another tool that authors use in syntax is they'll have a certain type of pattern going on in their writing, long and short sentences, and then all of a sudden there'll be a break in that pattern. It could be a break in the rhythm, it could be a break in the sentence length, or the use of punctuation. So when you're analyzing it, discuss why you think the author purposely broke the pattern. What are they emphasizing? Why? So here's a passage from Patrick Henry. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. So if you look at these words, we have some repetition. Petition is to ask. Oftentimes when you're wanting to change a law or something, you might sign a petition. We have remonstrated, which is to debate, to argue with, kind of in a formal way, kind of like politicians do in Congress. And we have supplicated, which is got a connotation of begging or asking, really. And then it's the next phrase kind of drives that home, because prostrated ourselves, that means lay down on the ground before a tyrannical king type idea. And then it repeats, though, the petitions have been slighted. The remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded. So all of this repetition is really to focus in on these 3 ideas: asking, debating, begging, and it hasn't worked. So it's a call to action by Patrick Henry. He's really wanting to build up the emotion, the passion, and he's using a group of 3. Authors often use syntax to have, to develop a tone or an attitude. So for the first one, these 2 statements have the same message, but they do it in different ways. I want to ask the authorities, what is the big deal? Why do they not control the epidemic? It is eating up lives like a monster. As you can tell, this is more of an informal diction and syntax. A more formal one would be, I want to draw the attention of the concerned authorities toward damage caused by the epidemic. If steps are not taken to curb it, it will further injure our community. Much more formal syntax. So when would you use one and when you would use the other? Well, that's when we talk about who your audience is. Another example is the use of punctuation. Now, some of you may know that a semicolon is used to connect 2 independent clauses to complete sentences instead of using a conjunction. But it's also used in syntax. What usually follows the semicolon is what's being emphasized. So let's look at this first sentence to see if it makes any sense. I went home, but the house was empty and the lights were turned off. Okay, according to the punctuation, but the house was empty is what's being emphasized. Let's look at the second one. I went home, but the house was empty. I have never felt more alone. See how this is much more powerful, and it emphasizes what's coming after the semicolon. Here's another example. It is not a good idea to miss a class, semicolon. Yet, if you have to miss one, you should make an effort to see a classmate's notes. So what's being emphasized? Well, you might think it's the first one, but really it's if you have to miss one is what's being emphasized. All right, this is a good example from John Updike. It has some short sentences and it has some long ones. It has some repetition and it has some good diction in it. That laugh said a strange thing. It said, "This is fun." These two sentences are very short and they are to emphasize what the tone is for this. Baseball is meant to be fun and not all the solemn money men in fur-collared greatcoats. Not all of the scruffy media cameramen and sour-faced reporters that crowd around the dugouts can quite smother the exhilarating spaciousness and the grace of this impudently relaxed sport. A game of innumerable potential redemptions and curious disappointments. We could spend some time on this, talking about all the words and their meanings and how it plays into this. But I wanted to show you a good example of short sentences and long sentences together and repetition. This is fun, not all the, and not all the. So this is a good example of the use of sentence length and repetition. All right, well, that'll be it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one where we look at passage 1 and 2 for syntax and diction.